So today I want to speak about Nibbida. It's a Pali word and it means disenchantment. That's how Bhikkhu Bodhi translates it. And this is a very important stage in the practice, you know, where we start to see through certain kind of ideas we have about the world and about our experience of the world. And the word Nibbida consists of two parts. The first part is ni, which means not, or a form of not. And bida means finding, so not finding. You know, we suddenly become aware or slowly become aware that we're actually not finding what we thought was there. If you really start to look deeply, penetrate into it, it's not there. It's very different than from what we thought it would be. And that has a very wished for effect on the mind, because it leads to, you know, according to the scriptures, how it's expressed there, it leads to dispassion, cessation, peace, direct knowledge, enlightenment, and nirvana. That nibbida, you know, at the beginning, when the practice starts to gain some strength, when we have seen, you know, that when we have seen through our delusions, when we have seen through our projections, and when we see suddenly, you know, oh, things are actually very different than from what I thought. And it can be, you know, painful. And I think sometimes it's even described, you know, as I think as the dark night of the soul, and all kinds of different traditions speak about that nibbida, you know. But it's a necessary, you know, jumping board for the practice to gain some momentum. Because it's, you know, it's like before you always just put the toe into the water, and when it's cold, then you should just pull back and do something else or look in the other direction. But then, you know, nibbida, when that has really hit us, then we just jump in. Because there's that sense of aha. It's an aha moment, yeah. And I'd like to, you know, kick us off with a poem again from the first three women, which is actually at the moment being translated into German by a young German woman, and I support her doing this. And we already almost finished with the first draft of the book, and we hope that we'll be finished by next year. So that's the poem I've chosen for today, because it speaks to me about nibbida. And the bhikkhuni is called Nandutara, translated as greatest joy. I spent most of my teenage years running from one bed to another. Any sign of warmth would do. Each worked for a while, and then they got possessive or mean or boring, or I did. Then I got new friends, shaved my head, and started eating once a day. During the long, lonely nights that followed, I would remember all the nice warm baths, all the late nights and long mornings, waking up next to beautiful warm bodies. One night, shivering on the ground, I started to cry. It's not fair. No matter what I do, the other thing always looks better. Listen, my heart, I know how exhausting it all gets. Don't give up until you are ready to give up for real. And I think, you know, it's that seeing of how exhausting it all gets. Because it's this repetition, the repetitiveness of our experience. And then it says, you know, hang in there, stay, you know, stay aware, stay mindful until, you know, that process is fulfilling itself in letting go. Because it's that paying attention to, in a way, you know, which allows nibbida to come forth, nibbida to occur, that we see, we are not finding what we are looking for in this manner, because it has never been there. It was just an idea. It's not that we are losing anything, we are just losing a delusion, really. And that's why, we have to hang in there. It's not letting go, it's not something we can just suppress or in a version, turn away, and all of those different misunderstandings, when we are afraid of experience. Some people might look very, very, very ascetic or something, and then there can be a lot of fear in that, being afraid of experience. But nibbida is not that. Nibbida is completely different. Nibbida is born from wisdom, which sees, not finding, looking and looking and not finding, and then the projection starts to dissolve, like a puddle of water in the hot sun. It just goes away. It just is dissolved. And this morning somebody introduced the sutta to me from the Anguttara Nikaya, from the fives, and I looked it up, and it speaks about 5 trainings, in order to support that process of nibbida, of disenchantment. And the 5 are, and I'm gonna speak about them, in contemporary language, because there's many different ways how that was translated, and some sound rather stern and rather kind of uncool. So I'm gonna try to speak in a way, that people stay connected. And the first of those 5 trainings is, seeing the body for what it is, or a super practice, which means, seeing the not beautiful of the body, which means, not denying the beauty which some, people have, especially young people, can be very beautiful. And the super practice is a balanced practice, which teaches us to also look under the skin, and see what's in there, and is that beautiful, or what is it? So that's the first training, to look at the body, not just like the surface of it, but just to look inside of it and see, those 32 parts of the body, or skin, flesh, and bones. There's many different lists, how we can look at the body, our own body, or at the body of others, or at both. So that's a super practice. And, this is particularly suggested for monastics to do, to deal with sexual energy, not to think that it's all so terrible, and that's why I have to turn away from it, but to more give a different viewpoint, and then, have both viewpoints, and that really helps to cool the mind. So that's the first one, a super practice. The second one is looking at food for what it is. Food which is needed in order to keep the body going. So we need food in order to sustain the body and keep the body healthy, keep the body going, so that we can practice. That's the function of food. And then, some people can be extremely absorbed in the whole realm of food. And, when me and Ayya Santacitta came to America, we felt like there was a lot going on here in America with special foods in the retreat centers. It was just like awesome, I would say, how much time would go into special diets for people, and how kind of over the top that has become, and become like big deal, a huge business, and like just overemphasizing the importance of food as a distraction, really, from other things. It's something which can waste a lot of energy and time in one's life. So I think that's that second reflect training, seeing food for what it is, as needed to keep the body healthy, keep the body going, and that's actually it. And then sometimes, maybe, we can use food as a skillful means to create some joy, but do not let it dominate our lives. That's, I would say that. And then the third point is cultivating non-delight, non-attachment for the entire world, and I think that the contemplation of the body and the contemplation of food are the entrance door into, seeing the whole world in that way. Seeing the whole world in a way which is, not becoming completely absorbed in our daily life, so to say, in the sense of losing ourselves in the ups and downs of the world, but rather using these ups and downs in the world to cultivate our relationship, how we meet those ups and downs. And and the body which is right here, and the food which we are every day in contact with to a certain extent, they can be like two phenomena which we meet every day, which we can use as placeholders for that, how we can enter into this. And then the next one is the contemplation of impermanence, which is a lot spoken about in the teachings. The contemplation of impermanence is considered the most powerful medicine in the Buddha's medicine cupboard, I would say. In the scriptures, I don't know exactly which of the books it is, he says, contemplating impermanence for the duration of a finger snap of time. There's a sutta, do you know where it is? Where he says, that's more meritorious than giving dana to the Buddha and the whole Sangha, right? Isn't that said in?
And even having a finger snap of metta.
Is the second.
Yeah.
Second most. Yeah. Is in the Anguttara Nikaya, yeah. So a finger snap, of contemplating impermanence is the most powerful one, and the next one is a finger snap of metta. So, and then the last one of the 5 is the contemplation of death, which we did a little bit in the guided meditation just before. You're using that contemplation of death as a wake-up call, So seeing the body for what it is the first one. Then seeing food for what it is the second one. Cultivating non-delight in the world, but I think what is really meant is non-attachment. Because, it doesn't mean that we should not delight in beautiful things, but it means about, how can we develop that art of delight, which does not translate into attachment. That's the art here. And contemplation of impermanence and contemplation of death. So those 5 contemplations, they are the 5 things, when developed and cultivated, lead exclusively to disenchantment, which is nibbida, because what we find out is you're not finding what you thought you are finding. And that disenchantment leads to dispassion. And dispassion in the Pali language is the word viraga, which comes from the Pali word ranj, which means to color. And vi again, is the negative. So the coloring comes out, through repeated looking in those 5 ways. It's like a powerful detergent which you put in the washing machine if you have very dirty clothes. it washes that out, that coloring, which is, just in our minds, really. It's a projection. And then this passion, when the mind is discolored, basically, when those layers of delusion have, been washed away through the practice, then the mind is much more capable, to see the ending of things, cessation. Because usually, that's also one thing which the mind usually does glance over, or does like not really pay attention to the ending of things. That's why contemplation of death, is spoken about, because, most people, would not by themselves have that idea, other than maybe if they have a great loss in their lives, then there's a huge jolt. And suddenly death comes on the scene. So cessation, being able to see the ending of things. And then, if we really see the ending of things, and we have, again and again, paying attention in that way, and then the resistance, slowly starts to give way, then suddenly peace comes out of that. And that peace, which comes from seeing clearly, enables us, to really have direct knowledge of the way things are. A mind which is peaceful can see very clearly. And then, there's that when the causes and conditions are coming together in the right way, we, have that full seeing the Dhamma, seeing the way things truly are, seeing reality, and, the mind is changed through that. And then, we really see for ourselves, each of us has the totality of the universe as their base. Because then those walls in the mind start to just kind of come down. Or we can say, there's a letting go. Which is, not something we can do, but we can put causes and conditions in place so that this happens when the right chemistry, then it just happens. And the Noble Eightfold Path, it's the template for living one's life so that it goes in that direction. That it brings us to this nibbida, this not finding. Because it's a way of living one's life where we, more and more everything what we have got, in terms of our energy, in terms of our means, in terms of our livelihood, everything, is going to be aligned to go in that direction. And that's a really empowering way, of leading one's life. And then whatever happens can be dealt with more or less inside of that Noble Eightfold Path. And then become more and more independent, from if we can have our way or not. And there's another beautiful poem, which I'm going to read now, which fits just at that spot very well. And she's called Bhadra Bhikkhuni, lucky. You always considered yourself lucky because things seemed to work out the way you wanted. Now luck has a different meaning. lucky to be walking a path that finds peace in the arising and passing away of each present moment, regardless of how things work out or don't. I think that's a very great way of staying steady with in very uncertain times, because whatever happens, it can be worked with inside of that Noble Eightfold Path. And there's nothing whatsoever which won't fit into it. And if the challenges become great, then it's really good to let go of some unnecessary luggage which we are carrying along, in order to conserve energy, to be able to stay steady when the going gets tough. And for example, the trees in the fall right now, they're letting their leaves fall down, because they are preparing for difficult times. They're preparing for the winter. And if there is a deciduous tree which doesn't let the leaves fall down, it's a dead deciduous tree. Because all others, the leaves just fall. Because this is the right thing to do in preparation for the winter time. And then the leaves, are rotting on the ground, and then they go into the earth, and the roots of the tree is going to store that nourishment for the next spring. And then the next spring, when the pollen are blowing around, in the wind, if the trees doesn't have any leaves on, it's much easier to be pollinated. So there's lots of benefits, from those leaves falling down. It's a letting go in preparation for strengthening. And I think that's a very beautiful way of looking right now, in the fall, where those things are all around us. Not so much here on the west coast, but certainly on the east coast. And we have a few of those deciduous trees here as well. And I looked it up today, on the internet. This process, of the leaves falling off the trees, it's called abscission, and it comes from the Latin word scindere, which means scissors in Latin, or it also means to cut. So there's like a certain don't know how we would call that, like a certain kind of chemical process happening, which makes those, which cuts off the leaves basically so that they fall down. And, cutting through luggage, which is not useful for this challenging time of the winter. And I think, Nibbida is that process, which helps us to support that cutting through, certain attachments and certain dependencies on certain things, which weigh us down really. And the Tibetan deity, the Manjushri, is the Buddha of wisdom, is depicted, I think sitting on a lion with a sword, cutting through. And and the ultimate sword of wisdom is really, emptiness, or anatta, and impermanence. That sword of wisdom, which just cuts through unnecessary ballast. So that can really help, if you see a tree with lots of leaves on the around it, you just stop for a moment and take it in. So, really reflecting, where am I with my practice and where do I want to go with it? And what fits into that? And sometimes that can be rather unexpected. So in my case, when those thoughts came up in my mind that I want to be a nun, I was kind of shocked. It was like kind of, wow, I would have never thought that I'd have a thought like that. I was rather horrified, I must admit, because it looked a very complicated thing to do, to kind of pack up my whole life and become a nun. It sounded like very inconvenient indeed. Yeah, but that's what's happened. And now I'm very glad I went through these difficult years, where I had a lot of battling with myself, and trying to get away. And I even got married. And it didn't last, I stayed
Before
with
you were a nun.
before I was a nun, yeah. When that yes, I did get married before I was a nun. And yeah, believe it or not, when at the beginning, when I thought I should be a nun, I just thought I get married because then I can't be a nun. But little did I know how quickly I was divorced again. I was married only for 1.5 years because obviously I should, I was supposed to be a nun and it happened anyway. So, but yeah. It was very ridiculous, really, because everybody knew that this would not last. I was the only person who, I also felt it, but I just had to do it. But then after that, that was total nibbida, believe me. I was totally ready to let go. So sometimes one has to do really stupid things, fully aware, and then you get the benefit of the nibbida. But that was kind of a long detour, and it was a bit dangerous actually also, but I won't go into detail. Yeah, it was very stupid. So I wonder, if any one of you would like to share anything with me or make a comment or so. And I think before we stop the recording, I can just read that poem one more time about the path. I can read both. The first one, Nandutara Bhikkhuni, greatest joy. I spent most of my teenage years running from one bed to another. Any sign of warmth would do. Each worked for a while until they got possessive or mean or boring, or I did. Then I got new friends, shaved my head, and started eating once a day. During the long, lonely nights that followed, I would remember all the nice warm baths, all the late nights and long mornings, waking up next to beautiful warm bodies. One night, shivering on the ground, I started to cry. It's not fair. No matter what I do, the other thing always looks better. Listen, my heart. I know how exhausting it all gets. Don't give up until you are ready to give up for real. So that's the Nibbida. And then Bhadra, lucky. You always considered yourself lucky because things seemed to work out the way you wanted. Now, luck has a different meaning. Lucky to be walking a path that finds peace in the arising and passing away of each present moment, regardless of how things work out or don't. So we're going to stop the recording now. Thank you.